Hello YouTube! Today we're going to be talking about colonization and part 4 of my Fixing Elite Dangerous series of videos and how I would undergo this process, or at least my thinking in terms of game mechanics. I apologize if my microphone is picking up my puppy dog playing with his toys, and he'll probably bark at me at some point. But at any rate, I will probably also do one further video over comments that people make over these videos in a couple of weeks. But at any rate, what is it? Well, this would be a way to get player groups involved. Right now, they've indicated that they want to open up the colonial area, or Colonia, out by Jacques Station into a new player bubble, or a new inhabited bubble, and kind of a desire to put player groups out there, although it's been kind of hesitated against by explorers and people who are already out there who are like, well, we seek this to be a cooperative area. We got out of the player bubble because we don't want murder hobos and stuff out here. You know, maybe at that point we need to open up a third bubble somewhere in the galaxy that would meet the colonization criteria. I personally right now would move for Colonia, and the people who don't like it, tough luck. But it would also add a bit of agency and depth of gameplay for player groups to exist. Why? Well, it'll give players a sense of investment into the game universe a little bit beyond what is capable within the bubble. Again, the premise of Elite Dangerous has always been you are just one amongst, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of commanders, and just one person amongst billions, tens of billions of humans that inhabit the galaxy. You're not the big damn hero, you're nothing special, you're just another pilot and just another ship. And that style of gameplay is basically described or ascribed to a niche core audience. It's not for everybody, and I fully recognize that, but hopefully this would address some of the complaints. It certainly isn't going to address all of them, because there's sub-segments of the population who want EVE 2.0 with cockpits, and equal or greater numbers who absolutely want nothing like EVE at all, and are perfectly happy with everything they just want to be in solo mode and space truck and not even get interjected by NPC pirates. So there's going to be conflicting opinions on all of this regardless. And it would give at least a little bit more reason for the, quote, grind, unquote. Again, though, I feel if the gameplay was better integrated, it would seem less as a grind, as doing one action would fulfill the tick boxes or check boxes for multiple roles and ranks and all of that kind of thing. So some of that would help. What I'm not proposing is a complete overhaul of social functions and features. I know this will disappoint many people out there, but it is very clear that David Braben and Frontier wish to step away from the traditional clan, guild, organization model, and I think any such proposal of that at this time would essentially be treated dead on arrival from Frontier Developments. So the purpose of this is, how would you fit it in within the kind of framework that they've laid out of how they want to see the game progress? It's very clear that David Braben wants an environment that fosters more cooperation with a little bit of mobile, murder hobos out there for, I guess you could say, excitement. I know other people will disagree with that, but they don't want the murder hobo mentality to become the ever-present how everybody plays the game, or, you either play by the game or they make you play by that rule set, or how they think you should play the game. So how would it work? Well, player groups would petition for a colonization charter. They all must already have a minor NPC faction within the bubble. They would petition Frontier with an existing name of a system, a planet, to start a colony on, and a name change for that system and a name for that colony. After an update, the systems would be populated with a starter colony that is extraction refinery to start, and you would start building up your little minor factions empire out in the new region of space. There would be some changes to the background simulation. Colonies would have to be more heavily influenced by player rather than background simulation actions. So take what players can impact on the current background sim and basically divide it by, 2 or 3, and that's how much impact the NPCs would have on those colonies versus players. So maybe, again, they act a little bit like a Keynesian actor, but at the same time, most of whether a colony survives, thrives, is dependent on what these player groups and the people that support them are able to achieve. Colonies must be supplied with goods and people to be sustained, much like systems within the current bubble, only it's mostly done by the background sim and NPCs at this point. And expansion would be triggered by supply levels, much like existing background mechanics. Basically, you would trip a system into expansion mode. Now, there might have to be some alterations to where system states can't be flipped at willy-nilly, and there's a little bit more hesitation to move that needle. So you can't trigger what we'll call a pledge drive and then all of a sudden go to a bust state because another group comes in running missions against it. If it triggers an expansion, maybe it is going to be an expansion no matter what else happens in the background for 2 or 3 weeks at this point in time. Charter groups. Players can join a chartered organization much like Power Play. They will earn shares for participation in weekly supply levels and pledge drives. So if you bring supplies and colonists and things like that to the colony, you'll get some sort of currency like merits for that. And the more shares you have, the more you can participate. Shares would not degrade over time, but maybe your rank. Maybe if you're a Class B shareholder, you get 50 shares per week or something. Whereas if you are a Class A shareholder, because you've done more activity, you get 100 shares and 100 votes. Again, it would probably fall in line a lot with power play mechanics, but at the same time, I would probably tweak the numbers and the amount of time that you have, because we are traversing distances of, 20,000 light years at least to get started. As such, maybe a colonization cycle would be 3 weeks or a month that it triggers on the first of every month from a gameplay mechanic standpoint. Numbers and details like that would be up for, I would say, negotiation / balancing proposals and stuff like that. And I don't want to get stuck in the minutia because there would be a lot of things there to sort out and balance from a game design perspective. This would not be very easy to do. And you would use these shares to vote on expansion targets, much like you would in Power Play now. Again, I want to try to keep these within existing mechanics that could be expanded, manipulated, changed, altered in order to fit the style of gameplay, instead of having to come out and write an entire new system from the ground up. Again, I think this could be done quicker over time, say Season 3, ready for Season 4, as opposed to having to go out and completely rewrite and write an entire new segment of gameplay. So getting colonists and supplies. Well, colonist missions would be generated, and we'd essentially have 3 types. You'd have migrant missions, pioneer missions, and then adventurers, which would be the equivalent of a VIP mission. Migrants. These are people that are wanting to get away from the current system wherever they are. It could be for religious persecution. It could be because the system state is in war, famine, outbreak. They don't care where they go, just so long as it is a station or planetary base labeled as a colony. And essentially what I would do in the database, I would add a colony flag for bases, all stations and planetary bases, and anything in the bubble right now would be essentially 0. It is not a colony. Anything out in Colonial added in would be considered to be a colony, and that would be set to 1. These guys don't care which colony you take them to, so long as you take them to a colony. Now, the impact on the destination would be cheap labor, so you would probably see a decrease in prices, increase in production maybe, more likely decrease in prices to the cost of production. But of course, these people are going to consume more colony resources and probably will consume more resources than, say, somebody who's going out there as a pioneer or a wealthy adventurer. Crime is going to go up. Health status and security so basically security is going to go down. Health status is also going to go down as the colonists who are coming in may, especially if they came from an outbreak system, may be carrying more diseases with them. Also, there could be a clash of cultural values. Look at what kind of going on in Europe right now with the migrant crisis over there. So these would be people coming in with not sharing the same cultural values, and that's always going to lead to tension. You could say that with the United States and immigrant populations from South and Central America and the rise of, Donald Trump. and what's been going on there. It does create societal friction, if you want to kind of get into that. Pioneers. These would be travelers coming from an existing NPC player minor faction system, so wherever their home base is within the bubble would generate pioneer missions. These are people looking for a challenge and a chance to make it big into the new bubble. Think, the original migrants who came over from Europe to North America, like the Pilgrims, did so because of religious persecution. The people who followed with the colonies were looking for new opportunities to maybe improve their lot in life. Many people were given generous land grants over in the United States from the King of England, let's say, and that increased their wealth and personal wealth and prosperity. These would be those same type of people looking for, again, this new sense of kind of adventure and opportunity. And they're going to come, and what they're going to do on the impact on the system is they're going to increase production because they're going to want to be there. And also, it's going to help maintain stability of the system because the people are going to have roughly the same core values. People migrating from England, whether they were with the first, second, or third wave, were still English. They spoke English. They were typically either Catholic or Protestant, but Christian. And as such, that tends to create more cohesive societies. Negatives are they are going to consume more resources. You're going to have to provide them with more food and medical supplies and things of that nature in order to make sure things don't get too out of whack. Then you would have adventurers. This would be your VIP missions. These would be rich passengers or corporations also looking to expand and exploit the new areas. These missions would be a little bit more unique than what we have now because it would require a mix of both passenger cabins and cargo racks. Not only are these people going to bring themselves or employees, they're also going to be bringing equipment along with them in order to set up new operations, maybe a new foundry, a new factory. But in other words, to also be able to exploit and expand out in the new areas just like the pioneers. Balance. They're going to increase production and colony, quote, wealth. It'll be easier to trigger expansion states. But the negative is going to be an increase in instability due to the fact that pioneers and migrants wanting to get away from this type of people and kind of get away from the man are going to be a little bit upset that these people are now basically coming in behind them. And this sort of happened with the colonies as you had English lords and stuff like that. Again, that as the colonies were established, were granted greater and greater land leases, or land rights, essentially, for going from England over to the United States, or the colonies at that time. So how would expansion be triggered? It would be system states like the current background system, only calculated separately. I've kind of touched on that. Colony flag in the database. Colonies would see a much greater impact from player activity rather than NPC, but once a system reaches expansion, it triggers a community goal-like event called a pledge drive. This pledge drive has multiple mission types, such as bring explosives and drilling rigs and other materials, and that means the new colony setup would be extraction. If you set bio-reducing lichen and resonating separators or chemical whatevers that refineries need, it would set up a new refinery. You bring in auto fabricators, it would trigger an industrial colony to be produced. You bring in technology stuff, it would trigger a high-tech system. At the end of the drive, which would probably be 3 weeks to a month in terms of how long it would go on for, the top two would determine what kind of colony would be set up. So if the top two were extraction and refinery, then the new system or the new station or the new colony would be a refinery or extraction/refinery. Or if it was industrial and refinery, it would be an industrial refinery or a refinery and industrial. And that would determine what type of new colony is added during the expansion. Now, there would have to be some special considerations here. If there was an Earth-like or water world in the system, it could set up the option of bringing in supplies like marine processing equipment for agriculture or crop harvesters. If you brought in those materials, it would generate an agricultural economy for that expansion system. If a terraforming candidate exists, it would also allow you to bring in terraforming supplies and then undertake the terraforming process. And I would show that in the background system. Maybe it's going to take 300 days to terraform. Maybe if you bring in more supplies and stuff like that, it takes less time. And again, each one of these would be tiered, and I think the tier would be what size colony and stuff like that would crop up. In the case of terraforming, the higher the tier you reach, the shorter the amount of time it would take to terraform. If you only reach tier 1, maybe it takes a year. If you reach tier 8, maybe it only takes a few weeks. And then if there's a tourist beacon in the system, you'd have the option of creating a tourism-based economy. So what would determine the size of the colony? That would be determined by some sort of tiered system. Which tier did you reach? And that would have impacts on how much is produced. Maybe tier 1 is a small planetary outpost, tier 2 is a medium size, tier 3 is a large. Then at tier 4 you get a space outpost. Tier 5 would be a small orbis, medium, large, and then if you get to tier 8, they would build a Coriolis station. And again, maybe it takes time for that to happen, all of that good stuff. So what are some of the pitfalls? Well, fifth columning is going to be a thing, a hostile takeover strategy, and I know a lot of people don't like this in power play, but I think it would be instrumental to the colonization gameplay. This would be how you would take over rivals' territory, is you would get people to do their missions, and if you wanted to counter that, maybe you would have to make an alliance with other player organizations to come in and support your cause, and it's basically going to boil down to who can herd the most cats, as it tends to be in most multiplayer type games where you have competing factions. Ultimately, in the end of the day, whomever can motivate their side the most usually ends up winning. But again, you could also, let's say that your player group is mainly focused on combat, and now you either have to expand that to include some miners, truckers, fighters, or explorers, or maybe you reach out to other player organizations. Maybe your group hates the space truck, but maybe there's the Space Truckers Alliance who absolutely loves the space truck. Maybe you can make a deal to say, hey, if you supply our colonies with the resources that we need and want, we'll provide security in your station. So as your guys are space trucking back and forth, we'll conduct, bounty hunting, go to res sites, go to the nav beacon, do whatever it is they need to do in order to maintain security for that system, while your guys are space trucking between them and your station and them and their stations. Eventually, maybe as more colony types spring up, it's, hey, we'll provide security. We've got an agricultural station. You need food and supplies. Work some of that kind of stuff out. Or, hey, we're going to build an agricultural station. Maybe you should build a high-tech station or something like that. There are multitudes of emergent gameplay possibilities out there. So what about government types? Because, well, that would be part of the background sim. It already is. Some are going to be tolerant to more situations than others, like an anarchy pirate type faction might accept a high crime level, whereas a communistic system maybe not. Maybe they have, and again, in how you decide to play things, if you're going to be a communist dictatorship that has 5-week plans, or you're a complete laissez-faire libertarian and Randian society that there are no rules, other than your rights end where my fist begins type. That would be up to you with the consequences thereof, whatever decision, however player groups decide to organize themselves. So what about wars? Well, unlike power play, there would be no invasion mechanics. There would be no direct wars in a military sense. Wars would exist in a corporate sense. Now, there wouldn't be guild banks to raid and things of that nature, but you would attempt to take over other people's territory much the same way that you would another corporation. A hostile takeover, normally you buy enough shares of the competing company to get your people on the board of directors who will vote your way when you come along and offer a merger or acquisition proposal. And that would be the style of gameplay that would be at its core here. Again, I realize that that's not going to appeal to everyone, but Elite Dangerous is never going to appeal to everyone. It is a rather niche game. And I think that this type of model would fit within the conventions that's been presented to the player base thus far by Frontier. And I think it's one that maybe, again, not everybody is happy, but I think could agree would work within existing constraints. Again, there's always going to be the people who want Eve with cockpits, and there's going to be the anti-Eve sentiment there as well. Timetable, I think that there's going to be a long periods of time to implement. Also, I think game ticks or terms for colonization would exist over the long term as well. Now, the problem with that is in game worlds, time is compressed, and Elite Dangerous is a game that unfolds in real time at a 1-to-1 ratio. But due to the situation, I've often likened it to where days in a game world are like months in the real world. If you have a military campaign in a video game that lasts 2 or 3 weeks, that's like a military campaign that lasted 2 or 3 years in the real world. After a certain point, people get burned out, get tired, and since this is not real world and entertainment value, if they get too burned out on it too quickly, they'll tend to go do other things. And then you've lost those people until they decide to come back again. So trying to balance that out is going to be, I think, the most difficult challenge here, because I think that these are goals that need to exist for 2 or 3 weeks, and there's pluses and minuses. With having long duration turns of, say, a month for a tick, you give people time. If this week, I'm busy. This week I've been running electrical wires downstairs and my big computer's shut off. So I've not been playing Elite Dangerous very much. I can play it on my Macintosh laptop here for the exploration part, and I can while watching TV upstairs with my joystick, and that's just fine. But if I wanted to do combat or any type of serious stuff with my complete CH HOTAS setup, that computer's out of commission this week. That's just the nature of how it is. Next week, we're going to be redoing a small bathroom, so I may not have a lot of time to play. But the week after that is Thanksgiving. I'm going to be a few days off, and if that's the case, then I might have time to play 10, 15, 20 hours over a course of 5 or 6 days. If it's a month-long tick, hey, I probably will find enough time to participate and do things in there. Again, the tier structure would probably have to be lowered down at first, and then maybe raised at a later time once production gets going in the Colonia region or the new bubble. But until then, I think a 1-month tick would be satisfactory. Again, I don't want to get bogged down too much in minutia details like that. These are things we can discuss in the comments section down below and, kind of figure out. But I would think that this would be something for Season 4 that would come along. Maybe some of it is implemented very early on, like the charter and the basic expansion and stuff like that is added in sooner rather than later. Again, I'm not proposing an entirely new mechanic here. I'm just proposing a very specific tweak to existing power play mechanics that actually should be simpler to implement in many respects. But again, the big crux of all of this, though, is presenting background simulation information in a much more easily digestible way within the game to show players what is going on in the background sim via charts and graphs, so that people can have an idea of the impact they're having on the greater game universe around them. Without that information being presented to the players, the new power play determined structure is not going to work, colonization is not going to work, and that's where they would need to put the majority of their focus, I think, for 2.3, 2.4, and maybe even 3.0, 3. Depending on how those all work out. Early into the first update for Season 3 or whatever comes next, as they've kind of hinted of getting away from the season pass mentality and probably going for straight expansions. Again, this is one of those things that I don't expect to be there until probably late 2017 at the very earliest, probably into the early parts of 2018 for this game mode to be properly implemented. Maybe I'm wrong, and the developers would come by and say, we might be actually able to implement that in 6 months. We already got a lot of the stuff there, just have to be tweaked, and this would be far easier than you think. Or they could come back and be like, you have no idea what it takes just to get power play to work. This could take us years to implement. I don't know. I don't know where they stand on any of this, and hopefully this gets shown around their office at some point and we can get some developer feedback on some of these ideas. thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, share to the channel. I'm going to probably give it a couple of weeks to see what kind of feedback we get in the comments between this video and others in this series, and then I will probably do a follow-up 5th video, and that'll be probably the conclusions. Maybe we get some feedback from Frontier Development, maybe from other players, but continue the discussions and dialogues. I know that one of the things they're also proposing to come up here is crime and punishment. I will probably do a video over what I think should be done, although that's getting to be a dead horse that's been beaten enough. But at any rate, thank you very much for watching. Fly safe and see you next time.